So there are a lot of videos about how to pick a certain weapon, character, hero, so on and so on, for many different games. And I wanted to go through a lot of different reasons for how to pick up a weapon or which one to pick. And some of these are going to be ones that you've heard before, but other of these are going to be ones that I'm going to take a deeper look into some of the points that people might make, or also mention some things that people have struggles with, but none of the videos ever really mention. The first basic thing is how to pick a weapon when you're going into a game for any game. First thing to do is simply go through all of them. It's plain and simple. You practice through them, figure out which ones really feel right, figure out which ones sort of match the playstyle that you want, and which ones that you have fun with. Now, sometimes you might not know immediately going in what the playstyle that you want is, so that might be something that maybe after you've played the game for a while and then you go back through the weapons again, you might find something that better suits you. The next thing to figure out is how many weapons to play. Now, people have many different opinions on how many characters you should play and all these things. You should only pick one. Well, the truth of the matter is that you play as many as you have time for. You have this balance between time and skill. You play as many weapons as you want for the time for at the skill that you want to play at. So if you want to play at a lower skill and you're keeping your time the same, then you can play more weapons that you want. But if we're going to keep our time the same and we want to up our skill, there reaches a point where we might have to drop some weapons. That playing all the weapons or characters in a game at a low level, you're going to have to drop them off if you want to play at a high level, and that you keep your time the same. Because you don't have enough time to play all of the characters at a high level. You have to make a distinction between your time and your skill that you want to be playing at. At the skill that you want to be playing at, you might not be able to play the weapons, or all of the weapons that you want. The next thing is I want to go into depth about when people say you should only main one character, because I'm sure you've heard it before. You should only play one thing or two things, have a secondary, and that's it. Now, the basic argument is that person of the same practice regime, the same skill level, a person can put 50 hours in one character, and a person can put 5 hours in 10 characters. Now, the person who put 50 hours in one character is going to know that character a lot better and is going to be playing at a higher skill level than the person who put 5 hours in 10 characters. Now, the person who put 5 hours in 10 characters, that isn't all completely to waste, because they can still beat a person who, of the same practice stuff, has put 5 hours into one character, into one of those characters. The reason for that is that they still gain 50 hours or so worth of knowledge through matchups, knowledge of some, basic game knowledge of map awareness, and figuring out, maybe what options the opponent wants to go for, and some of those things. Why is it that 50 hours in one character is better than 5 hours in 10? And for this, I'm actually going to go into Splatoon more heavily. Some of these will apply to other games, but we're going to focus on Splatoon. And it seems logical sense that 50 hours in one character that you're going to be better at it, because you've devoted your time to only one thing. But why is it that it makes logical sense? I want to break this up. The first thing that I want to talk about is the spacing. Is that you will understand the spacing of your weapon and how it goes against other weapons much better by focusing in on just that instead of focusing in on a bunch of them. Is that you will know exactly, just looking at a person, how far away they're standing. You will know whether or not you can hit them, rather than sort of guessing whether or not you can hit them. I know exactly how far, if I see a person standing, I know whether or not I can hit them with just one blast, if I can hit them with a bomb combo, how I need to move about to be able to kill them. And that's one thing that you will gain. The next one is the situations that you might find yourself in. And this sort of goes hand in hand with matchups, but slightly different. Is that instead of just talking about 1v1 matchups, there are various situations that you might find yourself in where the objective is in a certain location or the enemy team is in a certain position, in those sort of situations. And for those, you will understand where your weapon can best be applied for taking out the enemy team, where your weapon can maybe help your team the most, where you can play your weapon, or how you can take the objective from the enemy team. And putting 50 hours into one weapon, you will get to replay that situation 500 times with the same exact weapon, as opposed to replaying that situation a bunch of different times with different weapons. And playing it through a bunch of different times, things are going to be different between playing through a bunch of different weapons than playing through one weapon. You're going to be picking up a bunch of different things instead of really honing in on one thing that your weapon can do best. The next part that I want to talk about is I'll go to matchups. And when I say matchups, I'm generally talking about your weapon is pretty much in a 1v1 against another person's weapon. Now, this doesn't happen all of the time that you might think. Sometimes you actually have you might not think about it, but you have maybe your sniper standing behind you, or someone else has already painted down a bunch of ground, giving you an advantage against the 1v1 that you're about to go up against. So there are things like that you might not generally completely realize that are in your favor, but that don't make it a complete true 1v1, you're both on neutral ground sort of thing. But there's still a very hard 1v1 aspect that you need to be able to win, even if you want to play at higher level, when they don't always do 1v1s. And these matchup things is something that I'm going to be talking about again later on 2-3 times, that you will understand how your weapon faces against another weapon in the matchup. You will understand how to beat that weapon better by placing all of your hours into one weapon. You'll have some understanding of what the other weapon wants to do, but you have a much better understanding of what the other weapon wants to do against your weapon. And so it'll just go back and forth in this matchup of you understand what that weapon wants to do, that weapon understands what you want to do. Whoever understands it better, whoever has better spacing, whoever can, get the crazier shots off, one could say, is going to win. Now, the person who does 5 hours and 10 weapons, they might not even have the same aiming that you do if 50 hours in one, because you might play between a shooter, a blaster, a slosher, a roller, and a sniper. And all of those have sort of different aiming to them, because maybe even play a brush, and that has also completely different aiming. A brush, you want to tilt your gamepad to the way the brush is swinging to deal with the most damage. Rollers, you want to aim above people. Sloshers, you want to aim a bit above people sometimes. Blasters, you want to bunny hop around a lot because that's your movement and you're stuck on the ground if you shoot a blast from the ground. Snipers, dead on accuracy. You want a bunch of flick shots that you might do also with the Rainmaker. And so that person might not have as good aim, being able to swap off all of these different aiming styles, than the person who has 50 in one. Now, if your aiming styles for the 10 weapons that you happen to put 5 hours in, if they're all the same, then yeah, you're going to have about the same aiming that the person in 50 in 1 has. The next thing is angles that you can fire your weapon off at. The weapon that you have, you will know not only whether you can hit a person, but if the person is standing at a ledge above you or other things, you know where on the map you can hit, and you know what angle you need, how to aim your weapon to be able to hit those special spots. Maybe where a sniper is standing, or maybe where a long-range shooter might be standing, that they're exerting a lot of pressure on your team by being up there. And if you know how to hit that person or how to make them move off of there, then you're going to be a huge asset to your team, that you are preventing the sniper pressure, you're preventing the hydra pressure by knowing how to hit those ledges up there when you're on lower ground, or by knowing, if you're the hydra or the sniper up there, if you know all of the different shots that you can get off better than someone else can, then you will also be able to exert a lot more pressure onto the enemy team, which will help your team out a lot more. Angles also might include, all the various places you can right peek, or knowing how to even left peek a person. Since going back and forth, ducking in and out of cover, is also something that comes with map knowledge, but it's also something that might be a bit more weapon specific, since weapons have different run speeds, they have different movement styles. So that is one thing that you will be picking up that's different between the weapons. The other thing, weapons on deeper level, is understanding comps. The person who has 5 hours and 10 weapons might understand comps better than the person who has 50 hours in one weapon, which I know it's shocking to have a bonus for the thing that people always argue against. Maybe you'll have more knowledge because you understand those 5 or those 10 weapons at a deeper level. You understand 9 weapons, say, at a deeper level than the person who has 50 hours in one. You might. And that's one thing that also, if you put your hours into multiple weapons instead of just one, the comps that your team can choose, if you're playing at just not solo rank or solo queue, the comps that your team can choose is a bit more varied if you're a more varied person. And that can be one benefit for placing 5 hours in 10 weapons. However, I want to bring up that many teams generally won't look for a person who is just an all-around person. When I'm a team owner and I look at a free agent post or someone sends me a message, they want to be on the team, and they play 15 weapons, I might just straight up reject them right there, because a person can't really play 15 weapons at the skill level that I want them to be able to play at. There are a couple people, who have impressed me with the level that they play at, with the amount of weapons that they play at, but it usually just does not happen. It can be something that if you put all of those weapons onto your form and you want a team to try you out, the team might want to see all of those weapons. So you better be confident in playing all those weapons to the level that you want to play at. Otherwise, they're going to look at it and it's like, this person's good at this, but they're not good at these other weapons. And these other weapons are really what we need from the team. And the weapons that the person is good at, we already have someone who is better at it. Maybe the weapons you list, they really want to see half of them because those are the weapons that they need, and you just aren't good at that half as you are at the other half. So you have to know. And so all of the ones that you put on your form, you need to be able to play them at the same skill level. Or you need to understand that, or list them as a secondary or something, so that the team trying you out understands that your primary weapons are going to be better, your secondary weapons are going to be worse. And if they want to try you out for the secondary weapons, they understand that, and maybe you can be willing to change over, because if your primary weapons are at a skill level that they really like, but your secondary weapons are slightly lacking, maybe they'll still take you on the team, but they want you to understand that they really want you to focus on those weapons instead of your primary ones. Because they know that, well, if you can play the primary ones at this skill level, with a bit of time, you can play your secondary weapons at that skill level, and you'll be a huge asset to the team. So the next thing that I want to get onto is the high tiers of playing. Now, what happens when the weapon that you choose isn't a high tier weapon? Well, first of all, what dictates a high tier weapon to some extent is malleable. It can be changed. There is some extent to which you can change people's opinions on the weapon that you are playing. With this being said, there is a limit, and that limit is usually hard fact frame data. That if the frame data or the RNG or something about your weapon really sucks, there's going to be a point that you just can't compete anymore. And someone put it as a cashier example one time, where you could be the best McDonald's cashier in the world, but CEO Ronald McDonald is still going to earn more money than you will, because you were a cashier and he is the CEO. And you'll have to reach a decision that at some point you cannot play the weapon that you're playing at the level that you need to. Is that your weapon, the enemy team, will be able to exploit the weaknesses in your weapon or character so much that your strengths cannot come out. And while Splatoon is a fairly balanced game, there are still weapons such as the non-Octobrush ink brushes and the arrow sprays that they have so many weaknesses. There reaches a certain level where you just can't use them anymore. Is that teams can really exploit, the weaknesses of those weapons, given that they know how to fight those weapons, to the point where the strengths of the mobility and the painting simply can't come out, and that there are weapons that are better suited for what they do. Maybe the painting aspect can be covered better with another weapon. And so you have to reach a decision where, are you going to still stick with this weapon? Are you going to change out that weapon for certain maps and comps, or are you just going to drop it entirely? And that's just the hard truth of playing a competitive game. The next thing that I want to bring up is that a few more floater points. They're just going to be sort of wrap-up stuff. So there are weapons that you will also just play for fun. Maybe it's that weapon that was really low tier that you're trying to push hard, but you can't push anymore. And that's going to be a weapon that you play for fun, or something else. Some weapons, you don't necessarily need to play them all at the high skill level that you want to. Sometimes you just want to play a weapon for fun, and that is perfectly okay. Sometimes you need that because you just want to play some other weapon every so often. The other thing is that sometimes you want to play weapons or characters because you want to learn that matchup. Is that the best way to learn how to counter something is to play it yourself and figure out really what counters that something. The next thing that I want to bring up is sort of something that sort of goes hand in hand. That the weapons that you play can change, and I've mentioned this way earlier, is that as you gain in skill, maybe you'll figure out your play style better, your aim is better, and some other things, and that you go through the weapons again, and you find you have a weapon. You find a couple weapons that you like more than the current ones that you're doing, and that is perfectly okay. It is not like your progress is completely undone. Nothing like that. You still have, some map knowledge. You still have some matchup knowledge. You still have awareness and some of that aim that you are bringing into by playing those new weapons. So while your skills are going to drop off somewhat, it's certainly not going to be at the point where you're basically a new person starting off at the game. And it's completely okay because some weapons, sometimes blasters, maybe snipers, and some other weapons, either the way that you want to play them or just their ground skill level is higher up than other weapons. And so you might not have fun with those weapons until you have a certain amount of skill in the game. The last point that I want to bring up is if you just can't get into the groove of a weapon, that you're playing a weapon, get bored of it, playing another weapon, get bored, and another one, and you just can't find one thing. You're going back to weapon and all this going back and forth. What's the problem here? Well, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, maybe not the first thing, but one of the things that you might want to ask yourself is, do you like the game? Because if you don't like the game, if you don't like the ground mechanics, the core mechanics of the game itself, not necessarily the weapons, but just the game itself, then that might explain why you can't find a weapon. This usually wouldn't be the case, I would say, since there is some sort of ground basis that games are still fun to some extent, because people work hard to make these games the end goal of fun and feels good to play. So you might need to ask yourself why you don't like the weapon that you are using. Because maybe you're finding that you're just struggling a lot with matchups. And really, if you just need to sit down, you need to think through, figure out the spacing, maybe you'll find that the matchups that you're struggling with, that you're just playing them wrong. That there are ways around the matchups, that there are ways to beat people playing those weapons that you haven't quite figured out yet. and that when you do figure out, the small parts of your weapon that make a change in those matchups, you will like your weapon more. If you understand the small things that you can exploit in your weapon, maybe you'll like that weapon more. And if you're having so much trouble just finding through weapons, maybe you should ask people who play the weapons that are the flavor of the week for you. You should ask people about the problems that you are having and how they deal with the things that you are dealing with. And maybe that will help you finally figure out what weapon is right for you if you are really just going back and forth. So that is all the things that I wanted to mention about this video. Thank you for watching and listening in. If you have anything that you want me to talk about, please leave a comment below. There are still more of these that I have in mind that I'm going to be doing. So be sure to check back every so often. These don't happen too often, but thank you for watching. Yep. Nope. Thank you. You need to move. Freaking hell is. What is that? Oh, we're just bleeding by speed. We're just bleeding that I have a gun. I'm done with it.